For those who thought Stardew Valley wasn't rustic enough, those who want to live out a cowboy fantasy in a cozy farming sim, and those who want to throw a pie pan at a no-good varmint before he shoots a time-traveling scientist, then this is the game for you.
I damn you! I damn you! To hell!
Okay, maybe not that last one, that I know of. But for all others, look no further than Cattle Country. Welcome everyone, StealthyShiroean here, and today I'm bringing you my review of Cattle Country. Although there is a caveat in that I definitely haven't seen everything in the game, haven't even put in a full year in-game, but with just over 20 hours, I felt that this was a bit more than a first impression. Either way, take it as you will. Anyway, Castle Pixel developed Cattle Country with Platonic Friends acting as publisher. The game was recently released as of May 27th. There is a demo for those who want to give it a try before buying. Alternatively, or additionally, I could fill you in on my thoughts here. The pixel art in Cattle Country is excellent and consistent throughout. Because of the small canvas sizes for most of the sprites, I can see why some people might find the graphics off-putting for their simplicity. Personally, I can't say I'm the biggest fan of the character sprites, but I thought the art was charming overall and definitely added to that cozy vibe these games are known for. Furthermore, to make up for the simple character sprites, are character portraits when talking to an NPC, which I always appreciate and feel it's a necessity in games like this. The game also has a lot of little touches that dials up the immersion. All the wildlife flying overhead, flitting between the trees, or splashing in the water was unexpected, but I think it adds a certain something to the game world. It makes it feel more like you are living on the cusp of wilderness in the untamed American frontier. The ambience with the clouds, fog, and god rays in the morning were also much appreciated. I especially liked the clouds and how they would become transparent the closer the player was to a cloud. It added to the ambience without interrupting gameplay. Although, there were a couple times when it seemed like the time of day would get stuck in the early morning, because I'd have god rays on screen all hours of the day. Cattle Country even depicts the NPCs carrying things around. You'll see the mailman delivering mail, the woodcutter carrying wood, presumably to the carpenter, or someone just munching on a burger in the tavern. It's a fantastic addition to make the player feel like the people in this town are living lives, rather than being static members or aimless wanderers of a virtual society. The one thing I would knock is the UI in the game, specifically in the menus. There's just a lack of information. What are the buffs or debuffs that I have? Why can't I hover over landmarks on the map? What do the symbols mean next to the villagers' names? Obviously the present meant I gifted them an item, but I wasn't exactly sure what the heart with the plus meant. I'd love to see an overhaul in this department if the developers further support the game past release. Lastly, I just want to touch on the audio. First, there's not that much voice acting, but it is pretty cool they got Red Dead Redemption's 2 Arthur Morgan's voice actor, Roger Clark, reading the intro letter and doing the trailer readout. If nothing else, it's a fun nod.
You see, untamed lands need time to bear fruit, and some neighbors may take longer to warm up. But there's something that makes it worthwhile. A chance at freedom you won't find anywhere else.
As for the music, I thought they nailed the atmosphere really well, with it having a proper, twangy country feel to it. All the tracks set the tone just right for toiling away on the farm and living the frontier life. The ambient sounds were also great, especially the noises for the birds while roaming the forest. While an overarching narrative isn't necessarily a strong point of these games, there is usually a through line that guides the actions of the player and has some sort of influence on the NPCs. In Cattle Country, the player receives a plot of land in the American frontier. In a little opening, the player decides what their motivations are for doing so, but don't get comfortable with making dialogue choices, because they don't happen that much. After that, there isn't much hand-holding as the game wants players to experience things for themselves. I think this is all well and good, but there could have been just a bit more signposting. You eventually discover that the town isn't officially recognized by the government as a town, but merely a mining settlement. The mayor presents a large list of tasks to the player, which, of course, are all the long-term goals the players need to do to, quote-unquote, win the game. However, in order to even discover this cutscene and further story, the player would have needed to enter the bank, complete the first town project to repair Town Hall, and then enter Town Hall. This is also how you could finally upgrade your tent to an actual house, which I think many players would want. Intuitively, I figured I needed to go to the carpenter for this, which you do, eventually, but not until all the aforementioned things are done first. I didn't realize this until close to halfway through the second season in the summer. I think the game could get away with using the mailbox for this. Just have a letter sent by the banker or mayor, reminding them that any help for the Town Hall restoration project would be great.
Save the clock tower! Save the clock tower!
Any further story than that, though, I haven't yet encountered it. Cattle Country is very much a play-at-your-own-pace kind of game that I think most players of this genre will prefer. One major aspect of most farming sim games is their eclectic cast of characters and the stories told therein to flesh them out, or lack of them. Cattle Country has a variety of characters, each with their own relationships and backgrounds in the town. However, I didn't feel any of them had much to say. They do have dialogue specific to what they happen to be doing at the time, which is cool, but it gets reused immediately since they don't really have that many lines. Most of what they say also seems to be rather generic. Usually, character-specific cutscenes do the heavy lifting to show the character's arc, but besides the introductory cutscenes and the ones at the few festivals I experienced, I've only seen one for the Outlaw Jane. And actually, I liked that scene and wish the rest of the dialogue writing was as engaging. I think one of the reasons why I haven't seen too many character scenes is because it seems to take an incredibly long time to increase their heart levels. I haven't been giving gifts every day, and I don't go out of my way to give something to everyone, but I have been actively trying to increase my relationship with the townspeople. So far, I only have 2 people who are above the first art you start with when you meet them. That said, it could also be that I'm just not in the right place at the right time to trigger an event, in which case, I wish there was a bit more guidance since the map is quite large. Players begin the game with rather humble beginnings, some tools and seeds to get started, and a tent. Most will probably start clearing the ground to start their small farm. Farming, as it's a main aspect in these games, isn't much different than counterparts such as Stardew Valley or Harvest Moon. You till the ground, place the seeds, and water the plants. There's scarecrows to ward off birds, fertilizer you can make from a compost bin, and sprinklers to make your work that much easier. Although, were there sprinklers in 1891? Bottom line, the farming is fairly standard and not breaking any new ground. I still enjoyed the process though. Alongside the farming are a myriad of other activities. There's foraging, which, once again, isn't much different than other games like this, other than the fact that the map is large and there's a bunch of different mushrooms, flowers, fruits, etc. to gather. There's also an associated foraging skill, so I found myself traversing the wilderness a lot just to gather up items to sell or turn into refined products. Players can also pick up a fishing pole and capture some aquatic critters. The fishing minigame itself is a series of well-timed button presses where you need to make sure the pip lands on the green, but you can't deliberate too much or you'll lose the fish. It was enjoyable and at just the right challenge. I did think that the variety of fish felt limited though. It didn't seem to matter where I fished, whether in the lake, river, or along the shoreline, or the time of day. The change of the seasons was the only noticeable change when I would encounter different fish. Although there were a couple times I fished up something that I didn't expect, so it could be that I just don't understand the nuance, or maybe I didn't fish enough to collect those rarer fish types. Mining, another staple of the genre, also makes an appearance. On the overworld map, it's much the same as any other game like this. See a rock that you want to break? Then pull out your pickaxe and smash away. However, once you enter the mine, it's a little different because of the change in perspective from the top down to a side perspective similar to Terraria. At first glance, this is unique for the genre and was a neat change. However, in practice, I didn't care for it as much as something like in Stardew Valley, with its many different levels and randomized ores and enemies. First off, it just takes far too long to travel up and down in the mines. There are various things to make traversal easier, like the mine elevator, or finding fast travel exits as you're digging. Although, the former just takes a certain kind of rare ore to make that I didn't have a lot of, and the fast travel points seem to be random as to where they were. it would take my character hours of in-game time to get themselves down to where I was mining, and at the same time trying to get back out of the mines. It got to a point where I just let myself pass out and wake up in the hospital because otherwise I wouldn't be able to progress that much going further down. That said, I think there's a point where progressing further down doesn't really matter. I did see more gemstones the further I went down, and of course you have access to some better ores, although there still was a lot of the lower tier ores as well, making it a bit frustrating to get things like gold and silver. I think my immediate comparison to Terraria is what made me not enjoy the mining so much in Cattle Country. In Terraria, you come across vast underground caverns or ruins, there's different biomes underground, enemies, and random loot to come across. I know this isn't that kind of game, and the mining is only one small aspect to a greater whole, but I couldn't help being a bit disappointed since I didn't have the same joy of finding pockets of a particular ore I was looking for, or wonder of what's around the corner in this area I discovered. It's basically just mining through tons of rock, and that's about it. I think the novelty of the perspective change will wear off rather fast. In addition to all that, there is also hunting and some minimal combat. In a cutscene with the sheriff, he gives you your very own shooting iron. You could use this to hunt animals, although by the time I wanted to try and do that, I somehow lost my gun. Not sure if I accidentally threw it in the bin, or if there was a bug. Either way, I had no way to hunt since I had no way to make a bow either, as it required leather, and no one sold that as far as I'm aware. I did eventually buy a rifle from a traveling merchant though. Funny enough, despite not having my not-so-trusty 6-shooter, my character still pulled it out when getting jumped by bandits. And since we're talking about outlaws, let's get combat out of the way. Occasionally, and by that I mean rarely, when you're walking around, a group of bandits will come out from behind a tree and try to stick you up. You could choose to pay them, or of course engage in a shootout. This is basically another minigame where you need to time several hits in quick succession. It can be a bit tricky, but a loss just results in some loss of money and waking up in the doctor's office. Outside of that, there are some aggressive animals, but that's just a quick shot with your gun, or literally walking through an area transition to get away. The same is said for enemies that you encounter in the mines. It's simple and as non-violent as you can get with the game set in the American West, which is probably a good thing given the type of players this game would attract. Oh, and the devs actually made the combat completely optional by giving toggle settings to turn off enemies in the mines and overworld if you really wanted. With that said, hunting essentially works the same way, although instead of an animal trying to hurt you, it will run away if you get too close. Larger animals need 2 shots to take down, but others go down in 1 and will drop meat and pelts. The smaller animals are actually quite a bit faster and skitter away the moment they hear a gun fire off. Instead, you need to use a bow and arrow to tackle these small animals. Although, I didn't see the point other than to raise your hunting skill because the rewards were greater for larger animals, which were relatively common. Overall, hunting was a nice distraction, but it didn't seem that in-depth as far as I could tell. The map is quite large as mentioned earlier, and this is both a good and bad thing. It definitely gives off the sense of untamed wilderness as you're roaming around foraging or hunting. I like seeing the people wander around as well. Some of the townsfolk literally camp outside and change their campsite every night, or others go to the top of a large hill to stargaze. Others are just on a leisurely stroll. Once again, the game does a great job to make the world feel alive. However, with all these people wandering around, it's quite hard to find anyone if you were looking for someone specifically. Furthermore, as mentioned earlier, it's a bit hard to determine where event triggers are. I assume much of this won't be an issue as I play the game longer, but thought it was worth pointing out. Actually, one idea for the devs if you're watching this, is to include a bit more dialogue to the townsfolk that might be on what they plan on doing that day, or commenting on something they will do or have done. This would be great because it would give relatable small talk to the townsfolk, flesh out their characters a bit more, and be a nice narrative-friendly way to inform the player where they might be able to track some of these characters down on a day-to-day basis. As I mentioned earlier, the game does have a couple minigames for different tasks the players perform. However, there are several other minigames within the festivals I attended. Most of them just require proper button pressing at the right times, like with fishing or shooting.
Tell me one thing, where'd you learn to shoot like that?
7-Eleven.
But there were more unique ones like the horseshoe toss. I like these a lot since it gives the festivals more flavor than just talking to everyone, maybe buying something and seeing a short cutscene before returning to the farm. Although I did think they were too easy to complete successfully. One thing many festivals do in games like this is rely on the player's ability to care for their farm, whether crops or livestock, and use that as a way to judge the player's ability in a festival competition. Such as the Livestock Festival in Cattle Country. For players who immediately try to raise animals, then this is something they might be able to win. Or might not be even able to participate like myself, since I had no animals at that time. I think that's great, as it gives the players something to look forward to next year, since more than likely, the dialogue, setup, and just about everything else will be the same. In the case with the minigames, I'm unsure how exactly you could reciprocate this since it's entirely dependent on the player's skill. However, I was able to complete all the minigames with very little problem. Or if I did fail them with many of the games, I could just retry until I got first prize. They were a little too forgiving and maybe a tad bit too easy. I think it would be okay to tell the player, better luck next time. The players who wouldn't like this would be the ones who would just reload their day anyway, and the others would be looking forward to the following year to try again. Another thing the game seemed way too generous with was the quest reward money. For completing relatively easy quests, you could end up earning a ton of money in the beginning of the game. If spent wisely, I could see this as a way for the player to really fast track their start. Furthermore, the town's general store has sales just about every day. Each of these items are sold at discount, but the player could then turn around and sell them at their base value. So once the player has money, it's easily exploitable to continue getting money. Not to mention, I didn't find it that hard to earn money just from the stuff I planted and refined. That said, there are the game's long-term goals of elevating the town to a proper recognized status by the government. I think this is where much of your resources will be spent. The first project didn't cost that much to fix. I can't recall what the price was, but it was easily manageable. Even the house upgrade and chicken coop were only 5,000 gold each. However, the next town project to set up a railroad station was going to cost 100,000 gold. Quite a big ask, all things considered. So perhaps in the long run, all this money is balanced to what future projects might be asking for. On that note, I actually like that the long-term goals are front and center for the player to see. Many times when it gets to the endgame in these games, I don't really know what to do anymore. Or I happen to stumble across something that was well out of reach that I could work towards, but may not have uncovered it otherwise. I appreciated this and liked that I always knew what I could be working on. Finally, I did run into several bugs while playing. No, not these kinds of bugs, but the crash to the desktop kind of bugs. That said, I was playing a pre-release copy of the game, and I saw there was a patch release shortly before the game went live. I'm sure all of these issues will get ironed out in time if they aren't already, but what it did for me is highlight the issues I have with the save system. I know a lot of farming games will only save when you go to bed for the night or first wake up in the morning. They don't let you save midday, and man, this is just a big limitation to me. I wish these games were more open to being able to save anywhere, or at the very least have more checkpointed saves so that you don't lose a whole day of progress. Alternatively, so we can get up from the game midday instead of having to either play out the rest of the day or go straight to sleep to force it to save. I admit this is more of a pet peeve, but I don't quite get this limitation. And that brings us to the value and my final thoughts. But first, if you're enjoying the review or found it helpful, then please consider giving it a like, as that helps me out greatly with the YouTube algorithm gods. I put just over 20 hours into the game, and it runs for $18.99 USD normally, with the 15% off introductory deal marking at about $16 until June 11th. And as I said before, I haven't even finished a whole year yet, only making it to the end of summer. So there's still plenty of content left between seeing the different festivals, increasing my relationships with the townsfolk, and of course checking off all those objectives to make the mining settlement a real town. Cattle Country has more than enough content to justify the price. And while it does have its flaws, I enjoyed my time with it for the most part and still want to continue playing to see more. I wish the characters had a bit more to say, and some other elements of gameplay could be fleshed out as well. I'm unsure if there will be much in the way of post-launch support, but if so, I hope Castle Pixel tackles some of those things. If you played the game, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you haven't, then let me know if it sounds like something you'd be interested in, or if you have any other questions. I hope this video helped you out in some small way, and if it did, then please consider leaving a like, comment, subscribe, or whatever it is you feel like doing. Thanks for watching, and have a nice day.